The 2024 NBA Finals might seem like a normal matchup between two great teams, but there's underlying storylines that involve questionable superstars, timely injuries, and even revenge. So let's break down the secrets behind this year's NBA Finals. Now obviously both teams want to beat each other so they could hoist the Larry O'Brien trophy. But what if I told you that there are a couple players that are looking for revenge along with a ring? Kyrie Irving is one of those guys that is and should be looking for that revenge. Now it hasn't been great for him because the Celtics are dominating the series, but let's go over Irving's history with Boston. He was traded there in 2017, and I think everyone felt that this move would put the Celtics in a prime position to win. Sure, LeBron still played in the East, but Boston looked dangerous with a young Jaylen Brown and even younger Jason Tatum, and a guy who hit the game-winning shot in the finals not even 2 years prior. His first season with the team, he couldn't play in the playoffs, but somehow the Celtics still managed to take LeBron James to a Game 7. And this was in the conference finals, so it was one of the biggest stages in basketball. Kyrie Irving did not show up for Game 7 even though the game was in Boston. And I really think this is where the trouble started, because from there he had some other terrible moments. One of the things he did was that he promised Boston fans that he'd re-sign in 2018 and that he'd love to be a Celtic for a long time.
I plan on re-signing here next year.
But eventually he said, "I don't owe anybody when asked about re-signing in 2019. He also called out their younger players during this time, questioning their drive to win and what they really wanted to do in the league. And then the cherry on top was when Irving's conversation with Kevin Durant during the All-Star game was leaked, and eventually it was confirmed that they were talking about teaming up. Irving signed with the Nets in July of 2019, and even more problems came about between him and the Celtics franchise. A Boston fan got kicked out for throwing a water bottle at him when he was walking out of the arena, and then when Kyrie was in TD Garden, he gave them some not so nice fingers. And he also scuffed his shoe on the Celtics logo intentionally, which is the ultimate sign of disrespect. So yeah, there's a lot of negative history between the two, and both can see it as a revenge finals. Boston might try and stick it to Kyrie, who at one point definitely thought he was better than them, and Kyrie is trying to continue his disrespect of the franchise. Now the other side of revenge is a little bit less than that, but still worth noting, and that's Kristaps Porzingis against the Dallas Mavericks. There really wasn't a bunch of bad blood here, but it was obvious that during his time with the Mavericks, Porzingis couldn't play at his full potential. And I think a lot of that is because of Luka Doncic's playstyle and how he really never catered to the pick and pop that Porzingis is great with. But I also think it's important to point out that Kristaps was traded for Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans. And then Dallas's GM said that they were trying to make moves towards winning. Now I don't think this was a complete shot at Porzingis, but still, I bet it doesn't feel good to hear those words right after you're traded. Overall, I think this is a huge part of the finals and something that people aren't looking at close enough. But now that we've seen a couple finals games, I think we really need to talk about the stars of both teams. One of the reasons I was so excited for this finals was because I thought we'd be seeing someone take a huge leap into all-time discussions. Something similar to Jokic last year, because when he won the finals, people started asking where he ranks all-time and where he's at on the historic centers list. But from the looks of it, the stars just haven't been out to play, and it kinda sucks to see. For example, let's take a look at Luka Doncic. Even though his numbers are good and fans point to him as the only reason the Mavericks made it this far, the finals have done more to tarnish his reputation rather than enhance it. He got called out by the media and fans alike for playing pretty horrific defense through the first 3 games of the finals. And on top of that, he's been complaining a lot.
If Luka's ever going to be a winner coming out of this tunnel here, he is going to have to use what's happened in this finals as a learning experience.
In Game 3, Doncic fouled out in the 4th quarter and forced the Mavericks to challenge the play, even though it seemed pretty obvious to me that it was a foul. He was whining on the court the entire game, and then after, he called out the referees instead of taking accountability. And not only is this a bad image to put in the viewer's mind, this can't be encouraging for the team at all. It's got to be hard for the team to feel inspired when their leader is spewing negativity, playing questionable defense, and deflecting loss onto officiating. And if we take a look at this finals, I think it was very hard for Luka to become a villain in this scenario. He's going up against the Celtics, who are one of the most hated franchises in the NBA. And even if they ended up losing, people would have said it was because Boston had a super team or everyone else besides Luka underperformed. But now Luka is the guy getting all the negativity, and I gotta say it's his own fault. I also think it's fair to mention Kyrie Irving because he's obviously been underperforming outside of Game 3. But he's taking shots that he usually makes, and for some reason they're just not falling, so I would chalk that up to Irving getting cold at the wrong time. Now let's talk about Jason Tatum, a guy who is getting the most hate in the NBA right now despite being up 3-0 in the finals. It's no secret that Tatum has been pretty bad this entire playoff run, because even though he's averaging 25 points, his efficiency is not good at all. And this is really disappointing because if he was playing well with a clear-cut path to finals MVP, we'd be having some discussions about him being a solidified top 5 player in the league. But instead, he's just getting a lot of hate, and I can't even say that it's unwarranted because the dude has struggled to make any shot. I guess the bright side of this finals is that Jaylen Brown has been pretty awesome, and he's paving a path to be a legitimate #1 option in this league. He's the only star in this series that has really showed out, and if he wins the finals MVP, which is very likely, we're going to have to start talking about his status in the NBA. Is he a great Robin, or does he have the potential to be a great Batman? I know some people who wouldn't even take this question seriously simply because of the Celtics' run of the finals, so let's talk about it. I won't spend too much time on this topic since this has been everywhere, but people are really questioning the Celtics' playoff run. There's been a mix of injuries and easier opponents that started in round 1 with the Heat when Jimmy Butler missed the entire series. This carried over to the next round where they faced the Cavaliers without Jarrett Allen and Donovan Mitchell missing a game as well. Then they played the Pacers, and we all know that Indiana was pretty outmatched. And then Tyrese Halliburton got hurt, so overall everyone was just saying it was a fluke. Fast forward to the finals, and they're up 3-0 against a 5-seeded Mavericks squad. I think the overall hate on the Celtics is a little too much, to be honest. I think they're one of the better teams we've seen in NBA history and could have beaten those teams regardless of injury status. But I do agree that it's something to talk about, and when you mention their final run, it's fair to mention the injuries just a little bit. What I don't want to see is the disrespect towards the Mavericks, because I've seen a lot of people saying how they got lucky they made it this far. Now they're getting destroyed by the Celtics, and I've heard fans call them an average to good team, and that's just not true. Every team they faced in the West was a tough matchup, and their role players just happened to step up for playoff time. Keep in mind, that's the reason they're in the league. Guys like Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington were meant to play defense and do the gritty work. So I don't get why people are confused when they do just that. I guess people will find a problem with everything, but these narratives that the Celtics only made it here because of the weak East and the narrative that Dallas got lucky is pretty ridiculous. At this point, we could assume that the Celtics win this series because no team has ever won a series down 3-0, so let's take a look to the future. If the Mavericks lose this finals, there's a couple ways they could look at the offseason. Obviously, this year was a success and they proved to the world that they can compete in the West, but with the way the finals have gone, there's definitely a couple things they could look to switch up. For one, I think the Mavs should encourage Luka to work extra hard in the offseason and also make sure he rests enough, because if they want to stay at the top of the West, they gotta be ready for long seasons like this one. And while they should encourage this for every player, Doncic is the main guy I have a concern with, because as I stated earlier, his defense has been a liability this series. I also think they should experiment with someone else at point guard. Now I know what you're thinking, Luka is one of the best passers in the league and taking the ball out of his hands would be a mistake, and I do agree with you to an extent. I definitely think he should have the ball a lot to create opportunities, but it gets tiring when you're bringing the ball down nearly every play while trying to establish position in the post and looking for open teammates. If they had a solid point guard like a Tyus Jones, they could move Luka to the small forward position and have him rotate around the perimeter. Or they could let him get set up in the post and they wouldn't lose the entire playmaking aspect of it. Another thing I think they should do is go out and find shooters. PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. had a solid playoff shooting from beyond the three-point line, but I think they need some more guys where their main concern is shooting. I think of someone like a Corey Kispert or a Luke Kennard, and I'm not saying those guys specifically, but I think having another pure shooter in the lineup could help. Transitioning over to the Celtics and most likely the finals winner, there really isn't much they need to do. They have the best starting five in the league with a good supporting cast, and they're having players step up to take bigger roles like Peyton Pritchard. But one thing I can think of is the idea of adding more center depth. While it didn't end up hurting them that bad during this playoffs, Porzingis really scares me with all of these injuries. And I'm not too high on their backup bigs because Horford is getting old, Tillman is solid but only 6'7", and Luke Kornet just doesn't move the needle for me. They honestly lucked out a bit by playing the Mavericks because Derek Lively is only a rookie and Daniel Gafford just doesn't have a deep enough offensive back to be a consistent threat. If they were playing the Nuggets with Nikola Jokic or the Timberwolves with Cat and Gobert, this series could have been very different. So for them, I would prioritize getting a really solid backup big because Porzingis' injuries seem to linger. Other than that, I'd just keep building the core they have and prioritize on getting key pieces back. Now, even though I thought this series would be a little more competitive, the storylines and secrets behind this finals has made it fun regardless. Make sure to click on the screen for more basketball videos and follow our socials for daily NBA updates.